Chapter 1. Where it all began. I used to believe that evil always announced itself loudly, with shouting, or broken glass, or slammed doors, but in my house, it came softly, wearing perfume and calling me Mom. My daughter-in-law moved in after the pandemic, smiling sweetly, thanking us for our kindness. I welcomed her into every room, every corner of my life, never realizing that while I was opening my home, she was quietly closing me out of it. One by one, she changed the bills, the passwords, the documents, until my own name began to disappear. And the night I found her handwriting on the deed to my house, hidden beneath old photo albums in the basement, I felt something colder than betrayal. I felt erasure. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the fight for home isn't about walls or roofs. It's about reclaiming your place in the world you built with your own hands. But before everything fell apart, it began the way all stories do, with love, and a home built from hope. The house on Maple Street had been my dream for as long as I could remember. It was the quiet kind of dream, the kind you build brick by brick, year after year, without realizing it's becoming the center of your world. Charles and I moved there right after our wedding. He was 30 then, still wearing his army haircut and talking about discipline like it was a sacred language. I was 26, teaching second grade at Maple Grove Elementary. We worked, we saved, and we built that house together, one paycheck, one late night, one scraped knee at a time. For decades, it stood for everything good in our lives. The porch light was always on. Neighbors stopped by for coffee. I kept a small reading corner in the living room. Charles had his workshop in the back, where he fixed things no one else would bother fixing. We used to laugh that if the world ever fell apart, that house would hold us together. I believed it then. When the pandemic hit, it felt like time itself stopped. Charles retired the same year. Adam, our only child, was 36 and working in tech down in Denver. He had just married Madison, a bright, fast-talking young woman who ran a lifestyle blog about home design and mindfulness. They were struggling to find footing. When Adam lost his job and Madison's sponsors pulled out, we told them they could come stay for a few months. I remember saying it at the kitchen table. "Until things settle," I said, and Charles nodded. Madison smiled like she already knew she'd be staying longer than that. At first, it felt nice having them around. The house came alive again. Madison helped me cook, though she insisted on using olive oil for everything. Adam fixed the old gutter Charles had been ignoring for years. We ate dinner together, watched the news, and comforted one another when the world outside grew too heavy to bear. I told myself this was what family was meant for, but somewhere along the way, the house began to feel different. It was subtle at first. Madison started rearranging the living room, saying the light was better if we angled the sofa differently. She replaced my curtains with gauzy white ones that looked like they belonged in a photo shoot, not a home. She swapped out my old oak coffee table for something minimalist. Charles hated it. I tried to smile and say it was fine, but a part of me felt something shifting. Then came the grocery list. She took it from my hands one morning and said, "Let me handle this, Ellie. You've done enough. You and Charles should relax." It sounded kind, but her tone didn't ask. It declared. I let her, thinking maybe it was my turn to rest. For 40 years, I had been the one balancing every bill, keeping track of every expense, making sure nothing slipped. It felt strange handing that part over. Still, she seemed eager. And Adam looked relieved. So I convinced myself it was harmless. Weeks turned into months. Madison began to decide what we ate. No more bacon for Charles. No more cream in my coffee, because it wasn't heart-healthy. The fridge was full of things I couldn't pronounce. She started saying, "our kitchen," when she spoke to guests online. She filmed cooking videos in my home, arranging my dishes into perfect little patterns while I stood behind the camera, pretending it didn't sting. By the time Charles's 70th birthday rolled around, the house no longer felt like mine. Madison planned the entire party. She ordered everything, from the food to the decorations, without asking. I tried to help, but she waved me off with that gentle smile of hers that wasn't really gentle at all. The evening was warm, the kind of Colorado summer night that still smelled like lilacs. Neighbors came by with gifts and stories about Charles's days in uniform. I watched him smile, proud and tired, as Madison floated around greeting guests like a hostess in her own home. She had on one of those floral dresses that swayed every time she moved. Adam followed her everywhere, carrying trays and laughing at every word she said. When dinner began, I sat beside Charles, watching everyone dig in. Madison stood and clinked her glass. "Before we cut the cake," she said, "I just want to thank everyone for being here, and to thank Mom and Dad Hayes for letting us stay while we get back on our feet." She smiled sweetly, then added, "It's been great to help them get the house organized again. I even helped Mom figure out a budget system, so we can manage expenses better." The table went quiet for a second. Charles looked confused. She went on, laughing lightly. "You know how it is. Sometimes older folks get overwhelmed by all those online payments. I told her I'd handle it, so she doesn't have to stress." Someone chuckled awkwardly. Adam put his arm around her and said, "Madison's amazing at keeping things running. She's the organized one in the family." My face burned. I managed to smile and said, "Well, we've been fine all these years, but thank you, Madison, for helping." She laughed again, that airy, practiced sound. "Of course, Ellie, you've earned a break." The guests went back to eating, pretending not to notice the tension. Charles squeezed my hand under the table. His eyes said what neither of us dared to speak aloud. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I cleaned up the dishes, while Madison scrolled on her phone in the living room. I could hear her voice as she spoke to someone on a call. "No, it's going well. I'm helping them manage the house now. It's like a trial run before we buy our own place." I froze with the dish towel in my hand. Trial run. Those words stuck in my throat like a splinter. When she finally went upstairs, I sat alone at the table, the same one Charles built when Adam was born. The clock ticked softly, and for the first time in years, the house felt foreign. Every wall, every corner seemed to echo with Madison's voice instead of mine. Charles came in quietly, poured himself a glass of water, and sat across from me. "You did good tonight," he said. "I let her talk like I was her child," I whispered. He didn't answer. Outside, the porch light flickered in the wind. I stared at it, remembering all the nights it had guided Adam home, all the times it had told me that whatever happened, this house was ours. That night, as I turned it off, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed forever. I didn't know it then, but in that moment, I had handed her the keys to my own home. Chapter 2. Cracks in the family walls. The next few months blurred together in a strange rhythm that no longer felt like ours. Madison had a way of filling every space, every quiet corner, as if she were erasing the life Charles and I had built before she arrived. Breakfast used to be simple. 2 cups of coffee, a few slices of toast, and the morning news humming softly in the background. Now, there were rules. Smoothies only. No bacon, no butter, no processed foods. She wrote schedules on the fridge and highlighted them with pink markers. Monday through Friday, meals at exactly 8, lunch at 1, dinner no later than 6:30. Charles hated it. He pretended to follow along, sneaking potato chips into his jacket pocket whenever he thought she wasn't looking. I caught him one evening behind the shed, munching like a guilty teenager. I almost laughed, but the truth wasn't funny. We were both tiptoeing in our own home. Madison started talking to delivery people at the door like she owned the place, giving directions about where to leave packages. When our mailman accidentally addressed something to the Hayes residence, she corrected him with a cheerful smile. It's the Hayes Reed residence now, she said. I stood there holding a pile of envelopes, feeling something twist inside me. Adam didn't notice, or maybe didn't want to. He left early for job interviews, came home tired, and let Madison handle everything. He always said the same thing when I tried to talk to him. Mom, she's just trying to help. Let her feel useful. One morning, I was folding laundry in the hallway when I heard her voice from the living room. She was on the phone, pacing back and forth, her words sharp and low. I told you it's basically ours now. They can't even manage the place anymore. It's better if I just take over. She laughed softly. No, they're harmless. They actually think I'm helping. I froze, clutching one of Charles's shirts in my hands. The sound of her confidence made me sick. That was the moment something shifted in me. Later that day, when she noticed me quiet at dinner, she smiled and asked if I was feeling all right. I said I was fine. But my voice came out smaller than I intended. She kept talking, explaining how she wanted to repaint the front porch and maybe replace the mailbox. Charles looked up from his plate and asked who was going to pay for that. She smiled again, calm and perfect. Don't worry, Dad. I already arranged it. I could feel his jaw tighten. After dinner, he went out to the garage. I followed a few minutes later. He was sanding a piece of wood, though there was nothing to fix. She's crossing lines, he said without looking at me. You see it too. I see everything, I whispered. But if we fight her now, Adam will take her side. We have to wait. He put the sandpaper down, his shoulders heavy. You've always been patient, Ellie. Just don't let that patience cost us the house. A few days later, the doorbell rang. It was Sophie from next door, still in her scrubs from the hospital. Her face looked serious. Hey, Eleanor, I thought you should know. I saw a man walking around your property this morning. Suit, clipboard, taking pictures of the house, said he was from the county tax office. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my back. Did he say why? Property assessment, supposedly. But I've lived here 20 years. They've never done door-to-door checks. She hesitated. I just thought you should know. After she left, I went inside. Madison was in the living room with Noah, bouncing him gently and humming a lullaby that didn't sound like any song I knew. I told her what Sophie said. She barely looked up. Oh, that's nothing. Routine property checks happen all the time. That's strange, I said. We've never had one. She gave me that same sweet smile that made my skin crawl. Times change, Ellie. Maybe they're updating their system. Adam came in, as I was frowning. Mom, what's wrong? Your neighbor said a man was taking pictures of the house. He sighed. Madison already told you. It's routine. Don't worry about it. Madison leaned into him. I swear, your mom's a worrier. They laughed, and I stood there, feeling invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, the floors creaking beneath my slippers. Madison had rearranged the furniture again. The family photos that once filled the hallway were gone, replaced by her framed prints of beaches and modern quotes about gratitude. My kitchen smelled like eucalyptus and organic soap instead of cinnamon and coffee. Charles stirred when I slipped back into bed. You're awake again, he murmured. I can't shake it, I said quietly. Something's not right. He reached for my hand in the dark. We'll figure it out. But I wasn't sure anymore. The next morning, Madison announced she was hosting a small dinner for one of Adam's friends from a job lead. I offered to cook, but she waved me off. You don't need to stress. I've got this handled. She turned the dining room into a set from one of her blog shoots. Candles, napkin rings, even printed menus. The guests complimented everything. She beamed. I just love making this house feel alive again. When they left, I began clearing the dishes. Madison stopped me, placing a manicured hand on my arm. Don't worry, Ellie. I'll take care of the cleanup. You should go rest. Her tone was polite, but her eyes weren't asking. I nodded, turned away, and went upstairs, my chest tight. From the hallway, I heard her whispering to Adam. She's too attached to the old ways. It's sad, really. But she'll adjust. Adjust. That word lingered in my mind like a warning. A week later, I walked into the kitchen to find sticky notes labeled Madison's Zone on several cabinets. My spices were gone. She had reorganized everything. My old recipe box sat closed on the counter, pushed to the side like it didn't belong. I stood there for a long moment, my hands trembling. Charles came in and saw the labels. His face darkened. "What the hell is this?" "She says it's just to keep things organized," I said. He ripped one of the notes down. "This isn't her house." His voice was louder than it should have been. Madison appeared at the doorway, holding Noah. Charles didn't answer. He just walked out, muttering under his breath. Madison sighed. "He's been so tense lately." I looked at her, at the way she bounced the baby and smiled like nothing touched her. "Maybe he's tired of feeling like a guest," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Well, everyone adjusts differently." That night, I sat by the window and watched the porch light flicker. The same light I once turned on to guide Adam home now felt like it was shining for someone else. I thought about Sophie's warning, about the stranger in the suit, about all the changes creeping in around me. My house smelled different. It sounded different. Even the air felt heavier. And as I sat there in the quiet, I finally understood what had been happening all along. My silence was feeding her confidence. Chapter 3. Strange Signs. The first snow of November fell early that year, soft and quiet, the kind that used to make me light a candle and bake bread just to fill the house with warmth. But now, everything about that house felt cold. Madison was still running it like her own personal kingdom, and I was just a quiet ghost haunting the corners. Charles had learned to stay out of her way, spending most of his time in the garage. I spent mine pretending not to care. It was on one of those mornings, while I was sorting through old folders at the kitchen table, that Ruth Callahan showed up. She had been my friend for 30 years, long before either of us had gray in our hair. After retiring from her family law firm in Denver, she had moved back to Boulder to take care of her sister. We hadn't talked in a few months, but one phone call was all it took. She heard something in my voice and decided to come. When she stepped inside, she looked around the living room and frowned. The house smelled like eucalyptus oil instead of cinnamon. "Ellie," she said softly, "this doesn't look like you." I laughed it off, brushing flour from my hands. "Madison's been helping me redecorate. She has an eye for minimalism." Ruth gave me a long look, the kind that sees past the words. "That doesn't sound like you either." I changed the subject and asked her to help me review some insurance paperwork. Charles had mentioned updating the homeowner's policy, and I wanted to make sure it was still in order. We sat down at the table with a cup of coffee between us, papers spread out everywhere. Ruth put on her reading glasses and started sorting through the stack. Halfway through, she paused. "Ellie, why does this statement say Madison Reed Hayes?" I looked up. "What do you mean?" She slid the paper toward me. It was a gas bill. The name at the top wasn't mine. It wasn't Charles's either. It was Madison's. I felt the color drain from my face. That must be a mistake. The company probably sent it wrong. Ruth checked another envelope. "This one too. Power. And this one internet." She looked at me sharply. "Did you authorize this?" I shook my head. "No. I never touched anything." "She must have." "I don't know." Ruth leaned back in her chair, her lawyer voice emerging, calm but firm. "Ellie, this isn't small. If she's changing billing information, she's changing ownership control. It gives her leverage. If she wanted to claim residency or even partial ownership, these documents could help her case." I stared at her, unable to breathe. You think she's planning something? I think she's consolidating power, Ruth said. And you need to act before it's too late. Before I could answer, Madison came in through the front door, carrying grocery bags. Her smile was as bright as ever. Oh, I didn't know we had company. Hi, I'm Madison. Ruth stood, polite but cool. I'm Ruth Callahan, an old friend of Eleanor's. Madison set the bags down and brushed snow from her coat. Well, isn't that nice? I was just running errands. Ellie, did you see the new online billing portal? I moved everything there. It's easier for everyone. I tried to steady my voice. Why is your name on all of it? Madison's eyes didn't flinch. Oh, it's just the system. It needed one primary user, and since you said online forms confuse you, I figured I'd handle it. She laughed softly, like it was nothing. I never said that, I replied, my voice thinner than I wanted. She gave me that sweet smile again. It's fine, Ellie. I'll walk you through it later. It's not a big deal. Ruth spoke up then, each word deliberate. Actually, it is a big deal. Changing legal billing details without authorization can cause trouble. You might want to make sure it's corrected. Madison's smile faltered for just a second before she turned back toward the kitchen. I'll look into it, she said over her shoulder. When she was gone, Ruth exhaled slowly. You see what I mean? She's not hiding it. She's daring you to notice. I don't even know where to start, I whispered. Start by protecting yourself, Ruth said. Back up your emails, check every account, change your passwords, and keep copies of anything that looks off. After she left, I sat at the table staring at the bills spread before me. My name was gone from every one of them. That night, after Madison and Adam went upstairs, I turned on my laptop. The glow from the screen lit the dark kitchen. I logged into our utility account and saw it plain as day. Madison Reed Hayes, primary user. My heart sank. I clicked through the pages, searching for an option to revert it. But the account required the primary user's confirmation. I kept scrolling until a small notification popped up at the top of the screen. Billing address updated successfully. Confirmation sent to user's email. The email listed wasn't mine. It was hers. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I printed the confirmation page and tucked it into a folder. My hands shook as I did it, but not from fear, from clarity. Charles came into the kitchen a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes. What are you doing up? Just paperwork, I said quietly. He looked at the stack of bills. You're worried again. I'm being careful, I said. That's all. He kissed my forehead and went back to bed. When the house was quiet again, I poured myself a glass of water and sat down. Outside, the wind had picked up, blowing snow across the windows like tiny ghosts. I thought about what Ruth had said, about leverage and ownership, about control. I thought about Madison's calm eyes and the way she had smiled at me earlier, like she was already the one in charge. I printed another copy of the email confirmation and placed it in a separate drawer, the one I used for old lesson plans and keepsakes. Then I opened a notebook and wrote the date in neat, careful handwriting. Beneath it, I wrote what had happened that day, every detail I could remember. For 35 years, I had taught children how to write clearly and truthfully. Now, sitting in my own kitchen at midnight, I was learning how to write something entirely different. Evidence. Chapter 4. The Truth in the Basement. The following Saturday started like any other. Quiet and gray. The kind of morning that used to make me bake muffins just to warm the air. Charles was out in the garage fixing an old birdhouse. Madison had taken Noah to her friend's house for a playdate, and Adam was at a job interview in Denver. For the first time in weeks, the house was silent. I told myself I would use the quiet to sort through old papers that had been piling up in the basement. The basement had always been my place of order. Shelves labeled neatly, boxes arranged by year. I brought down a cup of coffee and switched on the small lamp by the stairs. Dust floated in the beam of light. It smelled like old paper and winter air. I started with a cabinet near the back wall, looking for insurance records Ruth had asked me to check. Most of the folders were where I had left them, but one drawer stuck slightly when I pulled. Something had been wedged inside. I tugged harder, and a slim folder slipped forward. The tab didn't have my handwriting on it. I opened it, and my heart began to pound. Inside were typed pages with a header that read, "Property Transfer Agreement." The form was filled out neatly. The address listed as 427 Maple Street, Boulder, Colorado. My address. The current owner field had my full name, but beneath it, in looping handwriting I recognized instantly, was Madison's. The section for new owner was blank except for her initials penciled in lightly. I kept reading. The form included tax details, parcel numbers, estimated value, and in the margin was a note written in the same handwriting. Tax assessment completed. Ready to file. My hands went cold. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sat down on an old stool and stared at the page. It was impossible, but it was right there in front of me. I reached for my phone and called Ruth. She answered on the second ring. "Ellie, what's wrong?" "I found something," I said. My voice shook. "In the basement. It's a transfer form." "Who filled it out?" "Madison." "I'm sure of it." Ruth's tone changed immediately. "Don't touch anything else. Bring it upstairs. I'm coming over." By the time she arrived, my coffee had gone cold. She walked in without taking off her coat, eyes scanning the pages as soon as I handed them to her. "This is an official form," she said. "It's legitimate. All it's missing is your signature and the notary stamp." She even wrote "ready to file," I whispered. Ruth flipped through each sheet. "This isn't accidental, Ellie. She's preparing documentation to show intent. If she can convince anyone that you were planning to transfer ownership, she could create a legal nightmare." "Has she mentioned anything about taxes or refinancing?" I shook my head. "Just talk about organizing paperwork." Before Ruth could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie next door. It read, "I found something you should see. Check your email." I opened the message she had sent earlier. Attached was a short video clip from her security camera. In the grainy footage, a man in a dark suit stood at our front door. He spoke to Madison for a few minutes, then she led him around the side of the house, pointing toward the backyard. He carried a clipboard and took photos of the property. Ruth leaned over my shoulder. "That's your so-called tax assessor." "That's him," I said. Sophie said he told her he was from the county office. Ruth pulled out her phone and called her husband. "Ben, can you run a quick check for me?" A man claiming to be a county assessor was visiting my friend's house. Medium build, dark suit, maybe mid-40s. She paused as he responded. "Send me what you find." While we waited, I walked to the window. Snow had begun to fall again, light and steady. From outside, the house probably looked perfect, just another quiet Colorado home. Inside, I felt like every wall had started to tilt. Ben called back 20 minutes later. Ruth put him on speaker. His voice came through low and serious. "The guy's name is Derek Moore. He's been charged twice for impersonating government officials. He shows up, pretends to be a tax officer, collects information, and disappears. He's on probation out of Arapahoe County." I felt my stomach drop. She let him in. He was in my yard. He looked through everything. "Ellie," Ruth said firmly, "I need you to listen. She's not just being controlling. She's building a case, changing bills, bringing in fake inspectors, creating a paper trail that makes it look like you're stepping aside." The words hit me like a door closing. I sat down at the table, gripping the edge. "What do I do?" "You document everything," Ruth said. "Keep every bill, every email, every piece of mail that comes through. I'll start pulling public records. Do not confront her yet. I can't live like this, I said. I can't watch her walk around my house, acting like it's hers. Ruth's tone softened. You will get it back. But right now, we need her to believe you still don't see the full picture. The longer she thinks she's winning, the more evidence she'll leave behind. I nodded slowly. She thinks my smile means surrender. Ruth gave a small smile of her own. Then keep smiling. After she left, I tucked the folder into a locked drawer upstairs, behind old family albums. I told Charles only that Ruth was looking into something for me. He could tell I was holding something back but didn't press. That evening, when Madison returned with Noah, she was glowing from the cold, cheeks pink, hair tucked under a beanie. She handed me a small bag of groceries. We stopped by the market. Thought you might want to try that new organic flour. I took it, forcing my voice to stay steady. That's thoughtful of you. She smiled. See? We make a great team, don't we? I smiled back, careful and measured. Yes, we do. She walked away humming softly, carrying Noah upstairs. I stood there listening to her footsteps fade, the sound of her laugh drifting down the hallway. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table again. I laid out the printed bills, the email confirmations, and now, the property transfer form. The pieces of the puzzle were finally visible. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving a pale reflection of moonlight across the window. The silence felt heavier than usual, but it didn't scare me anymore. It steadied me. I began writing in my notebook again, line after line, every detail Ruth had mentioned. The date, the document, the name Derek Moore. Each word sharpened something inside me. She thought my smile meant surrender. She didn't know I was counting her mistakes. Chapter 5. The mask comes off. By December, the tension in the house had thickened into something that clung to every breath. Madison had stopped pretending to be kind. Her words grew sharper. Her movements louder. Every conversation felt like walking through broken glass. It began with the small things. She changed the Wi-Fi password without telling us, claiming the signal needed to be protected from hackers. When I asked for it, she smiled, said she'd write it down later, and never did. The following week, the passwords for our online utility accounts stopped working. I tried logging in, but each attempt returned an error message. When I called the companies, they said the accounts had been recently updated and that only the primary user could make changes. The name they had on file wasn't mine anymore. I asked Madison about it while she was feeding Noah breakfast. She didn't look up from her phone. I updated everything. It's safer this way. You know how many scams target older people. I'm not helpless, I said quietly. She laughed, still scrolling. Of course not, Ellie. I'm just being proactive. Later that afternoon, I went to get the household files from the cabinet in the hallway. The drawer was locked. The small key that used to hang by the calendar was gone. When I asked her about it, she said, "Oh, I moved the papers to a safe place. Too many hands going through them. Too many hands. My hands." I told Charles that night, but he only sighed. She's pushing boundaries, he said. Adam needs to step up. He won't, I replied. Not yet. We ate dinner in silence, listening to Madison's footsteps above us, pacing Noah's room. The sound felt like a warning. The next morning, I walked downstairs to find the kitchen door locked. At first, I thought it was stuck, but when I turned the knob again, it didn't budge. Madison appeared behind me, holding her coffee mug. "Oh, sorry," she said lightly. "I locked it while I was cleaning. I don't want Noah wandering in. The stove knobs are loose. It's just for safety." "Safety from what?" I asked. She smiled, sipping her coffee. "Accidents. You know how easily things happen with kids around." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were testing me. I forced a smile and walked away. Inside, something hardened. That night, I took a small digital recorder from my dresser. It was one I used years ago to record reading lessons for my students. I carried it in my pocket and turned it on during breakfast, during afternoon chores, during every conversation that might matter. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I would find it. A few days later, while folding laundry upstairs, I heard her voice drift from the living room. She was on the phone again, the same smooth, confident tone that made everything sound reasonable. I moved quietly to the top of the stairs, holding my breath. "Once every account has my name on it," she said, "they can't evict me. The law's on my side. That's the beauty of it." She laughed softly, her voice fading as she moved toward the kitchen. That night, I played the recording back twice, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Her words came through, clear as day. I saved the file and transferred a copy to a small USB drive, tucking it into my jewelry box. The next morning, I called Ruth. She picked up on the first ring. "I have something," I told her. "Slow down, Ellie. What happened?" She said it herself. On the phone. I recorded it. Ruth's tone sharpened. "Good. Keep that recording safe. I'll have someone I trust look at the account details." 2 days later, she called back with news. I had Olivia Carter from the utility company check the logs. Madison used fake verification codes to switch billing access. "It's fraud, Ellie. She's technically impersonating an account holder." I sat in my chair by the window, gripping the phone. "Can they reverse it?" "They can. But we need proof that you didn't authorize it. Do you still have that email confirmation from before?" "Yes. Keep it. Print another copy. Every piece matters." When I hung up, I stared out the window at the snow melting into gray slush on the sidewalk. I realized Madison had underestimated me. She thought the quiet woman she'd moved in with would never fight back. That evening, Charles came inside from the garage, wiping his hands on an old towel. He looked tired, older than I remembered. I hesitated before speaking. "Charles, do you remember when we taught Adam how to fix that birdhouse? How he kept hammering the wrong nail, and you told him to start over until he got it right?" He looked at me carefully. "What about it?" "He learned what was right because we didn't let him pretend mistakes were okay." He leaned against the counter, waiting. "It's time to teach that lesson again," I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded, eyes steady on mine. Later that night, when Madison went out for groceries and Adam was upstairs putting Noah to bed, Charles helped me gather the papers from my drawer. We spread them across the dining table. The bills, the printed emails, the property form Ruth had analyzed, and now the new recording. The truth was there, scattered in ink and static. Charles looked at me. "What's next?" I took a breath. "We wait for Ruth. She'll tell us when to move. Until then, we act like everything is fine." He gave a slow smile. "You think you can pull that off? I've been doing it for months." When Madison returned, she was cheerful, humming as she unpacked the groceries. She glanced at us in the dining room and said, "You two look serious. Everything okay?" I smiled, folding the papers into a neat stack. "Just going over some family finances, routine stuff." "Good," she said, her tone light. "I like when things are organized." She didn't see the recorder sitting quietly in my sweater pocket or the cold determination in my chest. I watched her cross the kitchen, talking to herself as she put things away, and realized the mask she had worn so well was slipping. The house had turned into a stage, and I knew the final act was coming soon. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The snow melted overnight, leaving the yard slick and gray. By morning, the air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Charles was at the table, reading the same paragraph of the newspaper again and again. I stood by the window, watching Madison pull out of the driveway in Adam's car. Her taillights disappeared down the street. I turned to Charles. He didn't look up, but he nodded. You sure? I'm done being quiet. That afternoon I gathered everything, the folder from the drawer upstairs, the printed bills, the property transfer form, the screenshots Ruth had sent me, and the small recorder with Madison's own voice trapped inside. I laid them out on the dining table, lining up each page with steady hands. I wasn't shaking anymore. When Adam came home around 5, he was tired, snow melting from his jacket, his eyes already weary from whatever he was carrying inside. Madison followed, cheerful as always, humming to Noah while she unbuttoned her coat. She looked at me and smiled. Ellie, dinner's in the slow cooker. I started it before we left. Hope that's okay. Perfect timing, I said. I wanted to talk before dinner. She froze for a fraction of a second, then set her purse down. Talk about what? About the house, I said evenly, and about the things I've learned. Adam looked between us. Mom, what's going on? Charles came in from the living room and took his seat beside me on the couch. I gestured toward the coffee table where I'd placed the stack of papers. Why don't we sit down? I said. Madison hesitated, then smiled politely. Okay, sure. She sat across from us, Noah on her lap, bouncing him gently. Adam sat beside her, his confusion turning into discomfort. These are our utility bills, our bank statements, our property tax forms. All of them now list your name as the primary account holder, Madison. Every single one. Online systems can be confusing. Ruth's voice echoed in my mind. Let her speak first. Let her lie. I nodded slightly. Then maybe you can explain this. I picked up the property transfer form and handed it to Adam. Found in the basement, in your handwriting. Adam frowned, scanning the page. Madison's face tightened, the smile slipping for the first time. Where did you get that? She asked. In a locked drawer you never had a reason to touch, I said. You wrote ready to file. Tax assessment complete. That's ridiculous, she said, her tone rising. I was just drafting something. You misunderstood. I wanted to help organize your papers. I could feel Charles tense beside me, his jaw clenching. Help doesn't require a fake tax assessor or forged forms, he said. Madison's mouth fell open. What? I leaned forward. His name is Derek Moore. He's been arrested for impersonating government officials. Your name was on the notes he carried. For a moment, the only sound in the room was Noah's soft babble. Then Madison laughed, a small, brittle sound. You can't be serious. This is absurd. Adam looked at her, his voice low. Is it true? Of course not, she said quickly. Your parents are overreacting. They've never liked me being involved. I reached for the recorder on the table and pressed play. Madison's voice filled the room, confident, casual. Once every account has my name on it, they can't evict me. The law's on my side. The air seemed to stop moving. Noah whimpered, sensing the tension. Adam's face turned pale. Where did you get that? Madison whispered. I told you, I said softly. I've been listening. Adam stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. Madison, tell me that's not your voice. She turned on him, her face flushed. You don't understand. I was joking. I was frustrated. Your parents have treated me like a guest for years. I was venting. By stealing from them? He said. She shouted. Noah began to cry, the sound piercing through the silence. Charles stood, his voice calm but heavy. Enough! Madison pressed her lips together and turned away. When she finally spoke again, her tone was cold. If you push this any further, I'll take Noah and leave. You'll never see him again. The threat hung in the air like smoke, Adam stared at her, his voice cracking. You'd do that? You'd use him like that? I'll do whatever I have to, she said. I'm not letting them control me. He looked at her for a long moment. Then quietly, he asked, Did you ever love anyone in this house? She didn't answer. She just stared at the floor, eyes glassy, jaw tight. I looked at him, then at Madison, who sat stiffly, one arm wrapped around her crying son. You're right, I said. It is enough. I gathered the papers into a neat pile. We'll let the lawyers handle the rest. Madison stood abruptly, cradling Noah against her shoulder. You can't take my child from me, she snapped. No one said that, I said. But you've taken enough already. She glared at me, breathing hard, her confidence unraveling at the edges. You think you can win? I met her eyes. If it's a fight you want, I'm not afraid anymore. For the first time since she stepped into our lives, she looked uncertain, almost small. She turned and walked upstairs without another word, the sound of her footsteps echoing across the ceiling until the door slammed. Adam stood motionless, staring at the papers in his hands. I didn't want to believe it, he said finally. Charles put a hand on his shoulder. You see it now? He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. Yeah, I see it. We sat there in silence, the three of us, listening to the house settle around us. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than ever. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the bare branches against the window. It was done. The pretending, the hoping, the waiting, the truth had finally been spoken aloud, and there was no taking it back. Chapter 7. Justice and Karma. The morning after that confrontation, the house felt hollow. Madison stayed in her room with Noah, refusing to come down. Adam left early without saying where he was going. Charles and I sat in the kitchen with untouched coffee, the quiet stretching long and heavy between us. I wanted to believe that maybe she would apologize, that maybe she would realize what she had done, but deep down I knew we had crossed the point of no return. By the end of that week, Ruth filed the lawsuit. She brought every document, every screenshot, every recorded word into her office in downtown Boulder. Her assistant cataloged each piece carefully, labeling it with dates and notes. Ruth called me late one night to say it was done. The complaint is in the court system now. From this point forward, you don't talk to Madison directly. Let me handle her attorney. A few days later, Ben called with news of his own. We picked him up, he said. Who? I asked, though I already knew. Derek Moore. He was working out of Aurora under a fake business name. He admitted to taking photos and collecting tax data from your property, said Madison Reed Hayes paid him cash for the job. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hand gripping the phone. He confessed? Word for word, Ben said. He gave us everything. We'll send Ruth the statement. When I told Charles, he didn't say anything for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Good, he said. About time. The following weeks passed like a blur of paperwork and court dates. Madison's attorney tried to delay the proceedings, claiming stress, claiming confusion, claiming postpartum depression. Nothing changed the facts. The day came when the case was officially listed on the Boulder County Court docket. The name stared back at me in black ink. Hayes versus Reed Hayes. On the morning of the hearing, snow dusted the courthouse steps. Charles and I sat together in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, waiting. Ruth arrived early, sharp and composed, her briefcase heavy with evidence. Adam came in a few minutes later, his face drawn but steady. He didn't look at Madison when she entered. She wore a black coat and held Noah's stuffed bear in her hands, gripping it like it might save her. Inside, Judge Karen Whitmore presided. She was a woman in her late 50s, gray hair pinned neatly, voice clear and calm. She called the case, and everyone stood. Ruth presented the evidence first. The bills, The transfer forms, the forged assessor visit, the recordings, the email trail. When she played the recording, Madison's voice filled the courtroom just as it had filled my living room weeks before. The words echoed off the wooden benches. "Once every account has my name on it, they can't evict me." Madison's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him down. "The record will reflect the defendant's admission," Ruth continued. She introduced Derek Moore's written statement. He had confessed in full, explaining how Madison had approached him through an online ad and paid him in cash to pose as a tax assessor. When Ruth read his words aloud, Madison lowered her head. At one point the judge asked her directly, "Mrs. Reed Hayes, did you or did you not authorize this man to enter your in-laws' property under false pretenses?" Madison hesitated, her voice cracked. "I made a mistake. I just wanted to make sure the house was taken care of properly. They weren't managing things. I was trying to help." The judge's eyes softened for a second, then hardened again. "You falsified ownership documents, manipulated billing systems, and used fraudulent means to gain control of a property that did not belong to you. That is not help. That is deceit." Madison began to cry then, real tears this time. "Please, I have a child. I didn't mean for it to go this far," Ruth said quietly. She meant to go exactly this far. She just didn't expect to be caught. The courtroom fell silent. The only sound was the shuffle of papers as Judge Whitmore read through her notes. After a moment, she spoke. "The court finds sufficient evidence to convict. Madison Reed Hayes is sentenced to 2 years of probation for fraud and forgery of public documents. She is prohibited from any contact with the Hayes property or her son without supervision. Any further violations will result in immediate incarceration." Madison sobbed into her hands. Adam sat perfectly still. When the judge turned to him and asked if he wished to address the court, he stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, his voice low, "I'm filing for divorce. I'm also requesting full custody of my son, Noah." The judge nodded. "That request will be noted and fast-tracked for review." It was over. When the gavel struck the desk, the sound felt like a door closing behind all of us. Madison stood, trembling, then picked up her purse. She didn't look at me, or Charles, or even Adam. She walked out of the courtroom with her lawyer trailing behind, her shoulders hunched, her steps uncertain. She didn't turn around. Not once. I sat there for a long time, watching the empty doorway. Part of me had expected to feel triumph, maybe even satisfaction. But what I felt was something quieter, heavier. I didn't feel joy or anger, only balance, like morning light after a storm. Charles reached for my hand. "It's done," he said. "Yes," I whispered. "It's done." Outside the courthouse, the sky had cleared. The air smelled of pine and melting snow. Ruth joined us on the steps, shaking my hand. "You did everything right, Ellie," she said. "You stayed calm. You kept records. That's why justice held." "Justice," I repeated. "It's not as loud as I thought it would be." She smiled back. "No, real justice rarely is." Adam came out a few minutes later. He stopped in front of me, looking lost. "I should have listened," he said. "I didn't want to believe she could do that." I touched his cheek, the way I used to when he was little. "You see clearly now. That's what matters." He nodded. "I'll take care of Noah. I promise. I know you will." As he walked toward his car, I watched him lift his son from the car seat, holding him close, whispering something I couldn't hear. The child laughed, pure and bright against the cold air. Charles and I turned to go. For the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid to open the front door of our home. The wind brushed across my face, cool and clean, and for a fleeting moment, I felt something that almost resembled peace. Chapter 8. Peace returns to Maple Street. A year passed quietly after the trial. The kind of quiet that finally felt right. Autumn settled over Boulder again, painting the trees along Maple Street in soft shades of amber and rust. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, and when I opened the windows in the morning, the sound of children walking to school replaced the echoes of old arguments. The house that once felt heavy now breathed again. Adam had moved into a small apartment just a few blocks away. It was close enough that I could still see his porch light from the corner of our street. Every Friday evening, he and Noah came over for dinner. Sometimes they brought takeout from the Thai place downtown. Sometimes Adam cooked, laughing at his own attempts to recreate my recipes. Charles would open a bottle of cider, and the three of us would eat in the kitchen that had once been Madison's battlefield. Now it belonged to us again. Noah had grown taller, his curls thicker, his laughter brighter. He called the garden his adventure yard and ran between the rose bushes that Charles had brought back to life. Madison had torn them out once to make room for her outdoor furniture, but Charles replanted every stem, patient as always. By spring, the roses had returned, brighter than before. He said, "Plants remember kindness? I think people do too." As for me, I turned what used to be Madison's bedroom into a small reading room. I filled it with shelves, old books, and a second-hand table I found at a thrift store. Twice a week, neighborhood kids came over after school. I taught them how to read, how to love stories, how to find strength in words. Sometimes I would catch myself looking around the room and smiling. The space that once carried her arrogance now carried laughter and learning. Life was simple again. It was steady. There were still moments when I thought about what had happened, but not with anger. The memories felt like bruises that had healed, tender but no longer painful. One afternoon, near the end of October, Ruth stopped by for tea. She had retired completely now and spent most of her time painting landscapes with her sister. She still carried the same calm strength that had held me together through everything. We sat by the kitchen window, watching the leaves drift across the yard. She asked, "Have you heard anything from her?" "Adam says her lawyer sends updates through the court, but nothing personal." Still, there were times I wondered if she ever felt remorse, if she ever understood what she had destroyed. I didn't wish her harm anymore, but I didn't wish her peace either. Some lessons have to hurt. A week later, a letter came addressed to me, forwarded from Ruth's office. It was from an acquaintance in Texas, someone who had followed the case. Inside was a small clipping from a local newspaper. The headline read, "Businessman disappears after defrauding wife." I recognized the name immediately. Madison Reed Hayes. According to the article, she had remarried 6 months earlier to a man who owned a small construction firm outside Dallas. He emptied her accounts and vanished, leaving her with debts and no trace of him. I sat at the table for a long time, the letter open in my hands. Charles came in from the garden, wiping soil from his gloves. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, folding the paper carefully. "Just news from the past finding its way home." He raised an eyebrow. "Madison?" I nodded. "Seems she finally met someone who speaks her language." Charles sighed and poured himself a cup of coffee. "Karma doesn't need our help," he said. "No," I agreed. "It knows its own way." That night, as the house settled into quiet, I stood by the window where the porch light glowed softly. The same light that once guided Adam home now watched over a different kind of peace. I thought of all the ways kindness can be mistaken for weakness, how easily people confuse patience with surrender. They say kindness makes you weak. I learned that kindness only becomes weakness when you stay silent before evil. This time, I spoke loudly enough. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of roses through the open window. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. I closed the notebook that still held every page of my notes, every date, every word that had built the case. I didn't need to keep writing anymore. The story was complete. I turned off the porch light, feeling the same calm I had chased for years finally settle inside me. If this story touched you, remember that justice is not only found in courtrooms, it lives in the choices we make when we face injustice, in the courage to speak when silence feels safer,